Having lost my sister to cancer, I can relate to this lady's story. She found a way to channel her grief into something that continues to honor her sister's memory. And she's also working on eliminating the awkwardness and the discomfort associated with communicating grief. Her name is Dina Bell-Laroche. Dina, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing well this morning. I'm excited about the fall. It's one of my favorite times of the year. Two of my children are having birthdays, and I love the giving thanks that comes with it. So we're innovating in trying to, be with family in a different way this beautiful weekend.
You're not kidding. So we're filming this in October of 2020. We're still in the midst of COVID-19. The Canadian Thanksgiving is coming up. They're telling everybody, don't do what you normally do. So you're right. It's going to be a very interesting time, to see what happens here. Your story, I heard about your story, and I can relate so much to what you went through. And the way that you're able to channel things, that's what I'm essentially trying to do now with Grappling with Grief. So I can really relate to what you're doing. And your story I really wanted to tell. You're also Canadian, and I love my Canadians, of course. So let's start with your sister Tracy. So growing up, you had a sister Tracy, and I understand that she suffered from childhood cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that? Talk about what she had and when it was first diagnosed, and about her battle with that.
Yeah, thank you for that. So what's interesting is that she did have a very rare form of cancer, but she was 28 when it was diagnosed.
Oh, really? 28. Okay.
Yeah, a new wife, and pregnant.
Wow, she was pregnant at the time too.
Hmm. And my sister was more than just my sister. She was and continues to be my best friend. And what I'll share is when we found out she had cancer, she was 7.5 months pregnant, and I was a new mom. And so we went through this journey, the roller coaster journey that was her cancer story, together during that 14, 15-month period. So the form of cancer she had was a P-net tumor, and about 220 people, Jimmy, worldwide had the form of cancer that she had at the time of her diagnostic. And that experience when we found out that she had cancer, in that moment, everything changed.
Sure.
Yeah.
She passed in 2001 at the young age of 29. Mm-hmm. From what I understand, you spent the next several years after that coping with that loss and thinking about how you could honor your sister. And I've spoken, in other interviews about how I'm a big believer in finding an outlet. And sometimes you find it quickly. Sometimes it could take years. And in your situation, it was in 2014. We spoke off the air about your sports background. You were coaching an under-14 girls soccer team in Ottawa, Canada. And you decided to go along with 6 players from your team to Nicaragua. It was part of something called the Amazing People Gala, sponsored by CTV Television. Tell me about what that is. Tell me about what the gala was and why you went to Nicaragua, and the whole experience.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to weave a couple of things that you shared. Is that okay?
Sure, yeah, of course.
Yeah, beautiful. So great question. I would say, right after Tracy died, my way of coping or grieving was more instrumental. So I needed to turn to a project. And so for listeners to understand that everybody copes differently, my way was to cope in a way that would channel all of my energy into a project so I could get to meaning making, which is what you're speaking about, doing. And so the first 10 years basically of my grieving process was really channeled in cancer-related causes. So we were involved very, very early on in bringing the Relay for Life to Ottawa. Oh, okay. And reimagining what the Relay for Life could do. And, after a while, I got tired of focusing my energy on what took Tracy away. What took Tracy from me. So I needed a bit of a break from all that kind of volunteer experience. And what happened was, it's really interesting. So the Relay, the SchoolBOX is the charity that I became familiar with. And what happened was I'm a community coach, and I wanted to teach the girls more than just the 1, 2, 3s and ABCs of soccer. I really wanted to expand their capacity to be resilient, confident young women. So one of the things that I always turn to as the soccer coach is the True Sport principles, which is our commitment to making sport more holistic. And one of the principles with True Sport is giving back. So I was kind of brainstorming, how do I teach these girls who were 13 and 14 at the time, the importance of giving back? So we chose a charity. And I've been with these girls for a number of years. So every year, you know, when they were 11, 12, we chose local charities. This year, we wanted to up our game. And coincidentally, my dear friend, Kimothy Walker, who's a journalist and who's talked about my story, and the founder of the Amazing People Gala, talked about SchoolBOX. I quickly Googled SchoolBOX and said, this is the charity for us. Presented it to the girls. They're like, we're all in, Coach D. That summer, I taught them how to run a 5K. They were 12 and 13.
Nice.
Okay. And in the teaching them of how to run, you know, they were becoming liberated and confident, teaching them how to run in the backwoods, which were my crying woods, where I went to heal after the loss of Tracy. So everything was kind of starting to come together, Jimmy. And in that moment, you know, we did a fun run. We raised some money, just under $2,000. And then I link it back to True Sport, heard about our story. They did a national competition. We came in third. So they matched that donation. So SchoolBOX ended up with just under $4,000. And the invitation by the founder, Tom, was, you know what, Dina, you need to come to Nicaragua and help us build the classroom that you fundraised for. I'm like, there's no way I'm bringing kids to Nicaragua. And a year later, a third of the team, 6 young women, accompanied me to Nicaragua, supported by the Amazing People because they heard about this and they had a fundraising scholarship fund for youth. We end up in Nicaragua, and it was in Nicaragua that the idea that I could honor Tracy emerged.
What is SchoolBOX? I mean, obviously we know that they build schools, but what is SchoolBOX and why did they choose Nicaragua as the location?
Yeah, so little side note here. So SchoolBOX is a charity that was created by Tom Affleck and Ronald Rivera. And Ronald is a Nicaraguan man. Tom was working in Nicaragua years ago. So I'm thinking 15 years ago or so, doing NGO work. And Tom and Ronald became friends, and they realized that if we were going to, back then, if we were going to make a difference in the lives of these youth, then the only way to do that is by providing them with education. And Nicaragua has a lot of like rural countries, so their access to education is really limited, and it depends on someone coming and a teacher to make that possible. So time over time, it started with a notepad and a pencil. Mm-hmm. And Tom tells the story. So if anybody's interested in the SchoolBOX story, you just have to go to schoolbox.ca. Why it was so liberating is when I went to Nicaragua back in 2013, the organization was still relatively young, about 7 years. And I went there as a soccer coach, trying to equip my athletes with more than just soccer literacy. And in the midst of this experience, they brought us to one of the schools. And one of the schools was built as a legacy to a daughter who had died tragically. And her parents wanted to make meaning of Brett's life. So we go to the school, I'm visiting the school, you know, and then all of a sudden I had this out-of-body experience, this epiphany, where I realized that my sister's legacy could do the same thing. It was like Tracy was a social worker, basically. She worked with young offenders. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, surrounded by girls that I loved, in a community that I was growing to love, I realized that this could be a legacy for my sister. 3 months later, after we get home from Nicaragua, not 3 months later, 2 weeks later, my mom gets a call from Tracy's boss. Now, I just want to situate it for you and your listeners. This is 11 years after Tracy had died.
I know that's the crazy part. You're right.
Okay, so extraordinary events.
Yep.
So her boss calls my mom and says, Mrs. Bell, this is, Tracy's former boss. We're calling, and we realize this is an extraordinary call, but we never paid out Tracy's insurance money. And my mom was one of the named people. So my mom receives my sister's, portion of my sister's legacy. And we in turn use some of that money to build a library in the school that I had gone to with the athletes. And that's the love affair that began with SchoolBOX. And since that time, we've gone back and we've raised 2 classrooms in her honor. All my kids, I have 3 kids, and my husband, we've been down, I've been down 3 times. My husband has been down twice with me, and each of my 3 children have come to Nicaragua, and it's been transformative. It's a part of our healing journey, Jimmy.
For sure.
And you have to understand, we came home 2 weeks later, her boss called, so we had about $1,500. We needed another $1,500. So we started a little Knitting It Forward campaign. So I worked with the elderly who were in group homes with our dear friend Judy. And before we knew it, people were knitting it forward. We sold these little texting mittens back in 2013. And within, this is why I said 3 months, we had enough money to build a library in that school, in this beautiful community. And I have to tell you, I've been back twice since then. Every time I go back, we walk into Tipi Tapa, which was where Tracy's library is. The community comes out. Do you know that they now have a healthcare center, right? The community has electricity coming in. Like, you build a school, and school is hope, which is why this way of grieving allows us to kind of stay connected to the people that have died. And here's the message I want to share. The relationship with the person that you love does not die when that person dies.
For sure. Well, this was interesting. So, you create Tracy's Hope. Tracy's own money goes towards funding the building of this library. And now you mentioned the texting mittens. And this is an interesting story too, because working with seniors in retirement homes, oftentimes they don't know what to do with their time. Oftentimes they're looking to keep themselves busy and keep themselves active. And you were able to provide that for them and give them purpose. Tell me first, where did the idea come from to sell texting mittens of all things? Where did that come from?
If I had an answer to that, where do all my crazy woo-woo ideas come from? Well, at the time, right, I'm going to take you back to 2013. Texting was still like, what do we do? And we were moving into the fall. So we wanted something to do. And my dad's partner at the time, she was a knitter. And I think I asked her, I said, could you do some like fingerless, mittens for the kids? Because they're starting to text. My kids were a bit younger back then.
Yep.
And they loved it. And then a few of their friends said, oh, can we get some? So, something organic grew from that. And then before you knew it, I had friends who were buying them. We hosted fundraisers. It was easy to raise the money. Honestly, Jimmy, it was really easy to raise that first $3,000 to build a library was easy. Never in my wildest dreams in that moment did I think that I was going to build a school in honor of Tracy. It was, my head didn't know it, but my heart did. My heart did. And you know what? The Nicaraguan people knew it too. So every year I host a fun run. I've done 6. This year I suspended that. But we've also brought the community together in like really fun evenings. We hosted like an open mic where people came together at a little restaurant, and we had prizes, like a bingo kind of thing. So that was fun. We also hosted something in partnership with Lone Star where we sold tickets and people gathered. Lots of Tracy's friends and former colleagues, they've donated. So that was another thing, right? So they wanted to stay connected to someone who mattered to them. And the virtual grief cafes are another example of my capacity to give back. So every 2 months or so, I partner now with SchoolBOX. And just for people to know, like this idea was cementing in me back in January, pre-COVID. So I had put on the books with SchoolBOX. I was a board member for 6 years, and I just stepped down from the board. I wanted to stay connected. This is a life charity for me. Like having been in Nicaragua, seeing the impact of education on children, knowing how much that Ronald and Yasmin and Sarah and Tom, who are the kind of co-founders of this beautiful charity, their legacy is for me a life legacy, because I see the impact of hope and how that translates into possibility for these children. So Tracy, Tracy has a son, and his name is Liam, and he wants to go to Nicaragua to experience the legacy of his mom that he didn't get to know. And depending on where our conversation, the way that children grieve it's really important for the adults listening to understand and appreciate the way that children metabolize loss. Now, he was 13 months, right, when Tracy passed.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah.
So people have a sense of, well, he never even knew her. Why would he grieve? You re-grieve over your lifetime. And as adults, we re-grieve depending on, how we evolve as human beings. And the children in their different states, right? Because children go through different developmental states. Every time they enter into a new developmental state, they re-grieve because they now have more available to them. Children understand loss, and they understand loss from a place of somatic, their body. So it's not surprising that children often experience stomach aches, like physiological symptoms, because that's the only thing they can understand. Their bodies, Liam's body at 13 months, knew that his mom had died.
Mm. Well, I wanna read a few words here. So I understand one of the last things that Tracy said to you before she passed was, "Don't forget me."
Yeah.
And I've seen you retell that in other interviews before. Obviously, that stuck with you, that she said that. And so tell me a little bit about that, did that, in any way have anything to do with how Tracy's Hope came to be and honoring her legacy that way?
Wow. I need a moment. Yeah. Lest we forget. Mm-hmm. And so for Tracy, there were two things that she said. One was take care of my boys, which I took very seriously. And the second was, don't forget me.
Mm-hmm. 2021 marks the 20th year of her passing. I understand that your goal is to fund one classroom or one library per year with Tracy's Hope. That was your goal from what I read. So is your plan still to do that? And if so, are you only thinking Nicaragua, or are you thinking other areas of the world as well?
Okay, it's a great question. I would say that maybe in my early days I was on fire and I wanted to fill the hole in my heart. And now I'm at peace with the fact that I have a hole in my heart and I never want it plugged, because that would mean that I'm no longer remembering Tracy. So I'm really at peace with my grief. In fact, that's likely to be the name of my book that I'm working on. What I would say is the sense of urgency of trying to replace Tracy through the classrooms and the libraries has dissipated over time. What I am committed to is to continue to support my forever charity, as I call SchoolBOX, one classroom, one library at a time. And right. I'm at peace with, with the fact that there is no reward for speed when we talk about grief and loss.
I had never heard of thanatology. I'd never heard of it until I read your story, and you just mentioned your studies. Tell me what thanatology is. Tell me what led you down that path. And we spoke off camera about what your plans are in terms of your business and everything, but just kind of explain what led you down the path of wanting to study that.
Okay, it's great. Yeah, so thanatology. So ology is the study of, and thanos is death, loss. So thanatology is the study of death and loss. And I too had no clue what that was. But it's really useful, if nothing else, to wow people with your brilliant mind when you're playing Trivial Pursuit.
That's right.
So here's a couple of things that I'd love to share. The first is, death is not the opposite of life. Death is actually the opposite of birth. Life is what happens in between those two bookends. And when we can hold death as a natural process of living a human experience, there's like a settling in that occurs, and we can acknowledge the elephant in the room. And when we can approach the elephant and go, oh, I see you. I'm not sure when my time's going to be. I'm just going to make the most out of this time that I have on this earth. I'm going to live a life that matters, with purpose, in alignment with my values. I'm going to do good deeds. I'm going to apologize when I get it wrong. I'm going to do the best that I can as this flawed human being. And when we can approach life from that place, the fear factor of death starts to dissipate. And other cultures know this, which is why they have more lost literacy.
So we talked earlier about outlets, finding an outlet to help cope. And it's something that I'm a big believer in. And again, it's something that doesn't necessarily come to you right away. And in your case, it took years for you to find an outlet that suited what you needed to help you overcome the grief that you were dealing with. So I want to ask you this question, and I've asked this question to other people because everybody has a different answer or a different way of doing things. If anybody's watching this who maybe they're currently in the midst of trauma, maybe they're still dealing with grief, haven't found a way to overcome it, maybe they haven't even thought about finding an outlet yet, what would be your advice to them to help them cope, especially in your situation where it took years for you to kind of find the outlet that worked for you? What would be your advice for these people that are still in the midst of dealing with grief and don't know where to turn?
Wow. You know, the first thing I would say is it's not advice. You know, like that language of advice is, here's the script. I'll give you this prescription and then maybe this will work. And I appreciate the way in which you're framing it. So can I, you know, as we bumble our way through the conversation, it's like, here's what's coming up for me. You know, if you're feeling lost, if you're feeling alone, if you're feeling scared, if you feel like your world has just disintegrated, you don't know who you are anymore. That's all normal. So oscillating, dancing maybe between a lost focus and a life focus is such an important part of the healing journey. And what can sometimes disrupt that is the numbing, right? And we numb in all kinds of different ways: shopping therapy, alcohol, drug use, compartmentalization. It prevents us from then really benefiting from the life orientation, which can also then trigger secondary losses like guilt and identity and the loss around freedom and hope for the future and all the things I thought we were going to do. So being able to have healthy healing practices to expand your capacity to grieve holistically would include some things like this. What you and I are doing. I'm healing as I'm talking to you. I just want to share that with you, Jimmy. I'm inspired by what you're doing. So that also is nudging me along my healing path, which is an ongoing journey. I would offer that exercise. And if all you can do is move your body, our emotions need motion. Our bodies in grief especially are so lethargic. But in order for us to feel like we can breathe again, we need to oxygenate our body. So moving into a space of motion, whatever you can handle, going outside, nature, writing, you know, picking up a pen and I'll share with you, you know, as we conclude our time together, this what I'm being invited to do next year around bringing more lost literacy. Poetry. The poetic heart understands and can access language that speaks to our grief experience. Projects like the one you did and like the one I did, right? So there's lots of things we can do, and also our doing can be not doing.
Well, the next question I want to ask you has to do again with people's inability to talk about the situation that they're dealing with. And I specifically want to ask you about the grief cafes, because that I thought was an interesting idea. And because of COVID, like you said, you can't do anything in a physical location right now. Tell me about the grief cafes. What do you do with the grief cafes? And now that they're virtual, is this something that you're only doing in your area in terms of Ottawa, Canada, or is this something that you've opened them up to anybody basically anywhere?
Ah, I love it. Yeah, I'm not sure I'll do a real grief cafe, although I probably will when we come back. It'll be a beautiful way for us to commune together. So the grief cafe, came out of this inspiration of wanting to bring more loss literacy to the world. And this has been building inside of me for, the better part of 5 years now. And I'm just listening. I'm listening to all kinds of things, right? The physical, the metaphysical, what comes up for me. So I'm just trusting that this is the path I'm supposed to be following. And the grief cafes are they're a 90-minute experience. Whoever wants to show up, shows up. I haven't gone past 24 people, so I'm not sure. The way in which I've constructed it is everybody kind of has voice, whoever wants to have voice. Some people want to show their faces. Some people just want to join and listen. And everyone is different and unique, because of course everyone who joins is different and unique. And I'm a trained facilitator in peer-to-peer, so I'm exceptionally gifted when it comes to bringing people together, gathering, as Priya Parker would say, with intention and purpose. So the grief cafes opens with some music. I have a candle. I read a poem. I connect people and I offer some loss literacy. I pull from some of the research and the brilliant minds of people that have informed my loss literacy. And then I invite them by just opening up with a beautiful question. What drew you to this experience tonight? Why are you here? And in the unfolding of the conversation, I offer little nuggets, tiny little snackables, if you will. Because when people are grieving, Jimmy, their capacity to really absorb something is so tender, right? So I offer little snippets of what I've come to learn through my own lived experience and also informed by literature. And there's a settling, because what really is beautiful about the group is we can learn from each other. And by hearing someone else speak and inviting the name of the person that is really bringing them here, like, tell me more about your sister. What was her name? What did you appreciate most about her? There's like a settling and a catharsis that occurs, and the group can feel it. So these grief cafes, they're 90 minutes. People walk away with something meaningful. And then because it's done through SchoolBOX, and I give people an opportunity to make a donation, and they get a tax receipt out of it. They know they're contributing. Their tears are helping to build Tracy's third classroom. That's part of what I'm trying to honor. And because it's contributing to something good, to the hope of children in a place that doesn't have as much as we do. There's a healing in that process too. So people donate what they can. And if they can't donate anything because them showing up is everything they can muster, that's okay too. It's a contribution with heart, and whatever that looks like in any way, shape, or form, their participation is contribution enough.
For sure. Well, I got to say, I love what you've done with SchoolBOX. Because again, grappling with grief exists in order to try to help people cope with grief, in order to try to encourage them to overcome it, and channel into something positive. And so I love not only what you're doing with SchoolBOX and building these schools in your sister's memory, but also the fact that, again, with grappling with grief, I'm doing this to try to help people open up and try to help people be able to talk about their situation. Stories I'm telling, people can relate on some level. And so I love what you're doing with the grief cafes, and I love what you're doing with, trying to get people to open up and, like you said, literacy and everything. So I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. And again, this is Dina Bell-Laroche. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Hopefully. from Tracy's Hope and SchoolBOX. And good luck with the book, because I know you said you're writing a book too, so you're going to be an author.
I would say, some of the cool things I'm doing is writing. So for sure writing, and I blog about this stuff. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I'm offering a Grief Unleashed program. So if there are any, and I'm focusing primarily on coaches, because as you said earlier, you're doing a splash and ripple move, Jimmy. This, this experience that you're offering to all of us is creating and ship-shifting our capacity to be more literate in this important topic. So my way of doing that, I want you to, just invite you into my world. I'm big on now scaling impact. That's the driving 2 words, scaling impact. So one way that I do that is the grief cafes, or the virtual grief cafes. The other thing that I do is I'm going to be offering these this program so that I can equip coaches, right? So professional coaches like me with more loss literacy, because when we companion a Fortune 500 CEO, or we're companion a mother who just lost her child, a stillbirth, for instance, right? Or we're companioning someone whose identity has been shattered because now they've retired and they don't know who they are anymore, and all the plans they thought that they were going to be saying yes to are no more. I want to be able to equip my community of coaches with loss literacy. That's my splash and ripple move. I'm going to offer that in 2021 and see where it goes. But those are a couple of the ways in which I'm really excited about continuing my journey through grief.
That's very interesting. And we talked off camera about my background a little bit. I own a site called Fightful.com, which is about mixed martial arts and pro wrestling. And athletes in those avenues deal with the exact same thing in terms of, they have to deal with retirement. They have to deal with maybe an injury that forces retirement. Yes. And it's a very difficult thing. There have been a lot of guys, especially in the pro wrestling world, who have continued way longer than they should have, because they don't want to give it up. And people don't understand that even though it's entertainment, they sacrifice their bodies every time they're out there, and injuries happen all the time. And some guys, despite the risks and despite the injuries, they don't want to give it up because it's all they've ever known and all they've ever loved. And so that is a great thing that you're doing too. And when you are ready for that, we will talk, because I know a lot of people that could probably benefit from that.
Yeah, beautiful. Can I just say thank you? It really feels like a privilege to have connected with you today. I'm feeling very, I think the word's like grateful and humbled and really appreciative of the gifts that you're bringing to our world. It's really needed, Jimmy.
I appreciate it, and I appreciate you taking the time. And I don't want to go into too much detail, but I had a situation where someone reached out to me needing help, and I didn't know where to turn because I'm not licensed, or I'm not someone that can really help somebody in terms of this stuff yet anyway. So I sent an email to Dina, because I knew about your background and I knew what you do with things like grief cafes and all of that, and you were helpful. So thanks a lot for everything that you do too, and thanks for your time today. And it's been great talking to you.
Yeah, you as well.